Two of the most confusing categories that you'll run across in Google Search Console's page indexing report are crawled currently not indexed and discovered currently not indexed. What are these categories and what do you do if URLs from your website end up in these categories? So let's talk about what each of these are, starting with discovered currently not indexed. So when Google goes and looks at a website, the very first thing they have to do is they have to discover URLs that exist on the website. After Google discovers those URLs, the next thing they have to do is they have to crawl through those URLs. During a crawl, Google's fetching the content from the page, and then they move to the next step, which is indexing. During indexing, Google processes all of the pages that they found during the crawl, all the content that they found during the crawl, and then they decide how they're going to organize all that content into their database. And the database is what they draw upon for search results. So once a page is discovered, it normally should then be crawled, and then it normally should then be indexed. But if a page ends up in discovered, currently not indexed, what that means is that Google only found the page. They didn't continue on to those additional steps. They didn't crawl the page and they didn't index the page. So realistically, discovered, currently not indexed should be worded as discovered, currently not crawled or indexed. In other words, they've only discovered that page. So the question is why? Why did they only discover that page? And why didn't Google then continue on to do something else with that page? Why didn't they come back and crawl it and try to fetch the page's content? Now, sometimes this is a very simple answer. And what it comes down to is the page is simply newly added to the website. It's going to take Google a few days to go back and crawl it. So if you see a page that's in discovered, currently not indexed, and it's only there for a few days, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But where you want to start worrying a little bit more is if you see pages staying in discovered, not indexed for several days, for several weeks, or in some cases, several months, and they just persistently are in that category where Google isn't doing anything else with that page. They aren't moving beyond just recognizing that the page exists. In those cases where it's a more permanent state for a page to be in discovered, not indexed, you want to start looking at problems that may exist with the page. One of the problems might be that Google just doesn't understand the priority of the page. They don't understand why they would want to go through and do anything else with that page. So adding more links to the page, both links on your own website or external links from other websites, could be beneficial because that gives Google an additional signal that this page is actually something to pay attention to. It might also make sense to update the page as well. Not because Google is going to see the content, right? They aren't crawling the page, they've only discovered it. But by updating the content, you update the date, and that might mean that the page shows up on your homepage again. It might mean that it shows up in RSS feeds. It might mean that it shows up in an XML sitemap or elsewhere on your website. So that way it prompts Google to see that page again and hopefully come to that page a little bit more. In other cases, it's discovered, currently not indexed, because Google cannot crawl the page. So there's something preventing a successful crawl. And you can check for those kinds of technical issues that might prevent Google from being able to successfully complete a crawl of the page. Now, the other category is crawled, currently not indexed. So crawled, currently not indexed means that Google has not only discovered the page, but they've moved on to that second step. They've crawled the page as well, but they haven't moved on to the final step of indexing the page, of actually processing the content found during the crawl and then putting it into their index, their database that they'll draw upon for search results. So the question is why? Why did this page get stuck at crawled and then didn't move on to the indexing stage of the process? One of the most common reasons why things get stuck and crawled currently not indexed is because of some sort of content quality issue. Google thinks this page contains thin content or maybe unhelpful content or some form of spammy content. In a lot of cases, I see auto-generated pages from WordPress end up in this category, things that you don't need on your website, but Google's finding anyway, and you just want to get rid of these pages. That's simple to get rid of. It's somewhat harder if this is a valid page that you actually think contains high-quality content that Google maybe is putting into this category. Now, it's not always a content quality issue, though. Sometimes there's a technical issue that prevents Google from successfully fetching the content of the page. One of the most common things I've seen in looking at this across a lot of different websites is that pages end up in crawled, not indexed, because of problems with how the page is rendered for Google. Rendering just means how the page is constructed by the website's code. So if a website relies heavily on JavaScript to generate the website's content, sometimes Google can't successfully execute all of that JavaScript code. So if they can't execute the JavaScript code, then that page ends up looking blank to Google. And if Google looks at the page and says, well, this is a blank, empty page, there's no content here, then of course they're not going to put that into the index. So it ends up in crawled, not indexed. And in that case, you need to figure out, well, what's the problem with the JavaScript code and how do I resolve that in a way that Google will be able to successfully crawl this page and then understand that the content exists on this page and then move it into the index and then allow it to show up in search results. If you have any questions or need help digging into crawled, currently not indexed, or discovered, currently not indexed on your website, please email me at matthew@elementive.com. If you liked this video and would like more videos like this from Elementive, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.